I've always been pretty skeptical of paranormal activity, but there's one thing that's been happening to me my whole life that intrigues me. Sometimes, when I'm not focusing on anything or zoning out, I get a first person perspective look at an environment, like me standing in a certain place while a certain thing is happening. It's not like I'm actually there, I just see it in my mind's eye. I don't think anything of it until days later, when I find myself in the exact position I envisioned before, with the exact same thing happening. It's an intense feeling of deja vu, because I'm such a skeptic. I don't rate any of the images I get down because there are plenty of them that don't come true right away. And then I think that maybe I'm just thinking of common environments, and then I go there. But when the thing I envisioned happens, I can always tell. It's more than deja vu. It's like getting chills or a sense of being unnerved. Why do I feel this way if I'm not even convinced what's happening is real? Sometimes I can remember exactly when I envisioned it. Sometimes I just get the unnerving feeling, and I know that I must have seen it at some point, even if I've forgotten when. The strange part about this is that I talked to my biological mother about it years ago, and she says the exact same thing happens to her. I haven't brought it up since then, but I'm going to. For the past 3 days, I've been sleeping in my car at night. I want to get used to it for when I travel around the States. And I've been noticing strange noises happening to the right side of the driver side of my car. Without the noises even happening, I've been feeling unsafe as if my life is at risk. I think that fear is linked to me feeling a little vulnerable, sleeping inside of a vehicle in a large town. I'm sure the van life folk felt that for a little bit. At around 5 in the morning, I would hear two human footsteps on gravel. I've been sleeping in parking lots where no gravel is present. Weird, but whatever. Now, at around 6 or 7 am for the past 2 days, I've heard the sound of a van door opening, clicking into a locking mechanism, and one foot stepping off gravel. The sound of that is incredibly close and happened on the described side of the vehicle. When this first happened, I shot up and looked around to find not one single vehicle or person next to my car in the parking lot empty. Last night, I parked near a campground called Lincoln Beach Campground. It's right next to the Utah Lake. I parked the right side of the car next to a thick wood fence, not thinking anything about it. I parked close enough to where you couldn't even be able to open the passenger door at the halfway mark without hitting the fence. At about 6:37 am, I heard the exact same van door open, click into the locking mechanism, and the foot step on gravel ground. This time, it sounded strangely drawn out. The continuous sound of a single foot stepping onto the gravel was trippy to say the least. Honestly, the sound itself made no sense. Once again, on the right side of the driver's seat. I froze in fear because obviously nobody could be parked there. Slowly perking my head up to investigate, I saw nothing but the wood fence next to me. This isn't the first time I've heard unexplainable noises coming specifically from the right side of the driver's seat inside of my vehicle. I wonder if something has been following me. What's your thoughts on this? My grandfather told me that when he was a young boy, about 8 to 10, he and his brother were playing in this old shell of a car they had sitting next to their trailer on their farm. He said the car still had its seats and the steering wheel, but other than that, it was just a hunk of metal. Anyways, he said they were sitting in it, playing, when all of a sudden, they both got sleepy and fell asleep. When he woke up, he said him and his brother, were looking down on Earth, and he had asked the people where they were going, and they told him, 3 planets from behind the moon. He said he woke up back in the car next to his brother, and they looked at each other, and my grandpa said he asked his brother if they had the same dream, and he shook his head yes, with wide eyes. But after that, his brother would only deny it in front of other people, so he never shared the story again until that one night when I said I believe in aliens. After that happened to him, he's seen things and experienced things from that day on through his whole life up until about 10 years ago, when he said they told him goodbye. It's another story. He was probably 66 or 70 years old then. There's even been many times in his life where he should have died. I've always told people that I believe I'm part alien, because I think my grandfather is. This is something that happened to me when I was in school. I was playing with my friends when I caught the feeling someone was watching me. It was a big break, so many kids were running around, playing catch me if you can and stuff. Suddenly, I see this girl leaning on one of the walls of our school building. She just stood there and stared at me with this evil expression. Also, she looked very weird. She seemed to be older than me and had shoulder-long blonde hair. It looked thin and damaged. She also wore a black hat. You know, one like where magicians pull out their bunnies from. She was completely wearing black and had a cloak on that was black outside and red inside. She had her arms spread away from her body, like if her body would form a crucifix. I froze and stared back, confused from her weird appearance and behaviour. Then she said, "What the fuck are you looking at?" She said it in such an aggressive tone that I looked away and tried to act like I didn't hear it. At this point, I was kind of scared of her and not sure what to do now. She was still looking at me, watching me. When I blinked, she had moved 1 meter from the spot she was standing before. I was so scared at this point. Then I saw how she made side steps, slowly moving to the door of the building she was leaning on. She literally moved sideways, her bag touching the wall all the time. Then she was gone. I thought to myself that it was stupid to react like I did. I should have confronted her, but she was so fucking crazy. All the other kids were ignoring her. Nobody talked to her or gave her attention. I searched for her directly after she disappeared, but I couldn't find her. I remember my friend also saw her, but it's been about 10 years and we have no contact. I even did contact her some time ago, but she couldn't remember it. It's just a stupid feeling when something like this happens, and you know it happened, but nobody seemed to care, and the only person that could prove my point doesn't remember it. I feel lost thinking about it, and have no logical explanation. Since I was young, I could always tell if something is real, or just fantasy. About a month ago, I purchased a camera recorder for my PVS-14, the VRS MK3. I own a few night vision devices and wanted to be able to record when I go shooting at night. The night after it came in the mail, I clicked it onto my PVS-14 and tested it out in the house to see whether or not it was working. I started walking around my house, shining my infrared light and laser. I heard a noise behind me while I was walking into the hallway to the bedrooms. It sounded like it came from the sink. When I turned around, I saw nothing and kept goofing around. You can see shortly after this, I walked up to the kitchen and looked at the sink, still curious about the noise. Nothing there. It wasn't until after checking the recording that I saw that there was a white figure standing by the sink when I turned around. In fact, you can see something crouched over the sink when I look from the living room to the hallway shortly before. Important to note that the recorder is low quality, but I could see everything in that kitchen crystal clear when I turned around and didn't see anything odd. The light and laser were not on when I turned around. I did have an infrared LED on the back of my helmet, and my best guess is it's a reflection of some kind. Only issue with that theory is that I've tried to recreate it multiple times with the same conditions and have been unsuccessful. The house was relatively new, built in 1984, and while the owners that built the house recently passed away, they didn't die in the home. The following night, I was home alone and an empty can fell over on the countertop and rolled into the sink while I was on the other side of the house. The second I heard it hit the countertop, the hair on my neck stood up. I knew for a fact that the can was sitting level on a flat surface, with no open windows or source of a breeze. A week after recording this, my girlfriend gave me a call while I was at work. She said she felt like someone was in the house. She said she couldn't explain why, other than she heard loud clicking occasionally. I told her it was probably the thermostat kicking in and that I'd be home soon. My girlfriend woke me up the next morning, wondering why I left the scissors in the middle of the floor, downstairs in the den. I told her I know for a fact I left them in the chopping block in the kitchen before I went to work the day prior. She said she hadn't been downstairs in a couple days. We're the only two in the house. Our house is a bi-level and we mostly live upstairs. The downstairs has a bedroom, bathroom and den for guests. She was freaked out since she heard clicking the night before. Haven't had anything weird happen in the 3 weeks since. My earliest memory was when I was 5 or 6 years old. My brother and I shared a room and our bed faced the hallway. Our door was always open since my brother and I were young. I remember waking up and seeing a woman's finger. She had long, painted black nails. Keep this in mind. For years I've been having a recurring dream where I would be running away from her. I would eventually make it to an alleyway and there would be an older guy with a doctor's coat yelling, "It'll be okay, come here." He would manage to capture her and restrain her in a hospital bed. Who is this her? I don't know much about her, but before the dream started, I had gotten a very realistic dream. It felt as if it was actually happening. She was sitting on one of the dining room chairs with a doll on her lap that looked just like her. She had messy black hair, white laced gown, a veil, pale skin, and the exact black nails I saw a few years back. Please hang with me, this isn't the craziest part. In that dream, I couldn't speak. Remember that. I would see her in different forms, mostly as a doll or her human form. I would see her everywhere. It didn't matter where I moved. She would all appear in hallways, my bathroom, etc. There would be nights I would hear talking at night. It sounded like two people talking in gibberish. After 10 years of this, I finally told my parents about it. My mom prayed over me in my room. Later that night, my mom had a dream of her. She looked at my mom from on top of her bed, then grabbed her legs and dragged her to my room. My mom tried rebuking the demons, but guess what? She couldn't speak. I asked my mom for more detail on how she looked, because I didn't fully believe her. She told me she had a veil on, something I didn't tell her. But she said the veil was covering her face, but with me, she had it up. I don't know why she had it up with me. I don't know why she's so persistent watching me. After that incident, it stopped, but I still sometimes feel as if someone is watching me. Okay, so I just thought I'd put this out there. Not really even as a warning, but more as a way to share information with individuals that could possibly go down a similar path to me, with the wrong mindset, and possibly make the same mistakes I did. I've always been fascinated by the supernatural/paranormal, ever since I was a child, and my obsession began after reading the Darren Shan books. Anyway, that's beside the point. So when I went to uni, I started getting into a lot of occult reading. I went to uni in central London, and there's a bookstore called Watkins. Anyway, I would spend many weekends there perusing the different occult books and artifices that they sold. Often, they were very expensive, but I'd gotten a student loan and had some money spare to play with. Eventually, after many months, having read a number of occult books, I decided to get a Ouija board. Yes, I'm a fool. Okay, so a couple of weeks later, me and my girlfriend are chilling in my uni room. We've had a little to drink, but not too much. I decide to bring out the Ouija board and see what she thinks. Needless to say, she was initially skeptical and apprehensive, which made sense. She has a family history of extremely proportions with the paranormal. That's not my story to tell. Eventually, we nut up and decide to try. At first, nothing really happens. We ask silly questions and I try to scare her a couple of times as one does. So eventually, we start to relax more and it turns more into a game than a true experience, trying to contact the other side, in our minds at least. I decide in my ignorance to call out to an entity while we're using it. Azazel, a name I'd read about in some of the occult books aforementioned. My girlfriend looks at me strangely, as at this point, I'm kinda just losing it, calling out to this entity. Thinking back, I'm not really sure what compelled me. I shit you not, my curtains start to close really slowly by themselves, and my wardrobe starts opening and closing. To say we both shit ourselves would be an understatement. We ran out of there. We got a coffee and talk about it. But even at that point, we're semi-laughing about it. Probably read too many books or something, became desensitized. I don't know. I walk my girl to her dorm and go back to mine to sleep. That night, I had the most intense dream of my life. And let me tell you, it was a nightmare. I don't really feel like going into details right now, as I get severe anxiety when I visualize it too much. But basically, it was of hell, torture, and suffering. Years later, I've never touched anything to do with the occult since, other than to protect myself against contact from entities that wish to do me harm. To say that the dream I experienced that night scared me would be putting it nicely. Anyways, that's my story with the paranormal. Take it as a lesson, a warning. However you wish to internalize it is up to you. I just felt I needed to express it. Okay, so I live with my grandparents, and they have a small house. I sleep downstairs in the living room, which overlooks the garden through a pair of large sliding doors. I've been a smoker for years now, and will often find myself sitting outside late at night, having a smoke. The strangeness began almost a month ago. So as I'm sitting watching some videos on my phone while having a late night smoke, I start to get a really bad headache. In my head, I'm assuming I've just been on my phone too long, and so decide to switch to some music instead. As I'm listening and about done with my smoke, ready to get up, I see a strange sort of black smoke figure near our conservatory at the end of my garden. I look at it for a while, wondering what it could be, or if maybe my mind is too addled from the lack of sleep and I've begun hallucinating. Anyway, eventually I convince myself it's nothing and go inside to sleep. Nothing happens until maybe 2 weeks later, when the same thing happens. This time I use the torch on my phone to light up the area, but I can't seem to see anything. Once I shine my torch on it, so I get up and see the same black some figure in the gloom. Its head was angled towards me and I was really scared. I felt like maybe everything I believed to be true about the world was wrong. Just to clarify, I'm a really skeptical person by nature, preferring to lead my life on the assumption that the observable cannot influence us, even if some strange entities may exist. So yeah, I was shook. I eventually gathered the courage to run inside, but I don't know. I've seen it from those big window doors twice since, and it's freaking me out. I feel like it's watching me. For what reason, I couldn't tell you. What should I do? A couple nights ago, my friend and I spontaneously decided to go smoke really late into the night, like 2 a.m. Our new spot is his girlfriend's treehouse, which we've only gone to a few times and isn't too deep in the woods. It was an ice cold night, so the leaves and ground were frozen, leaving a loud crunch with every step we took. This will be important. We got to the treehouse and tried lighting the lighter, but it was out, so my friend left to go to his girlfriend's house to get a new one, which was only a few hundred feet away. He left me alone, which I had no problem with at the time. I was able to hear him walk into the distance due to the loud crunches, and I decided to just go on my phone to pass the time. About a minute in, I heard clearer than ever footsteps that just seemed to appear right under the treehouse, and started walking around. For a second, I assumed it was my friend, but he had just left, and there was no way he'd be back already. I also realised that with the ground being frozen, I should have been able to hear his footsteps coming from far away, way ahead of time. As all this was going through my head, I heard the footsteps walk towards the bottom of the ladder and just stop. I completely froze and avoided moving so that whatever was below me wouldn't hear me. I texted my friend hoping he left his girlfriend's house and was just messing with me, to which he responded that he was still over there. I told him what happened and to hurry back, but he didn't take me very seriously. Luckily, I had a cinder block right next to me, ready to throw at whatever was about to come up the ladder. A few minutes went by and I didn't hear the footsteps again. Of course, I had my friend's footsteps coming from at least 50 feet away coming back. I just decided to completely forget about what happened, and we went on with our little sesh, spooked out. At the time, we were living on the ground floor of a small block of 2-story units. It was in the morning. My mother and I were sitting down watching the television, which was against the wall. Behind us on the right was my parents' bedroom, and to the right in front of us was the front door, and beside that, a window. I recall we were watching the TV, when in the corner of my eye I saw movement. As I turned my head to see what was moving, I could see humanoid shapes speedily walking, or maybe running, into my parents' room, as if he walked in, through the window I'd guess, though perhaps it was the door, and went into the back bedroom. Not through their doorway, but straight through the wall, as the crow flies. I turned to face my mother, and she was looking at the same thing. We were both surprised. I ran into their room to see what was there, and it was just my father laying down, fast asleep, on the bed. So I returned back to the TV, thinking about what I just saw, and about half an hour later or so, my father gets up saying that he had a dream, that an ancestor of ours came to speak to him. He recounted the strange dream he had and the person he was speaking to. I recall him outlining how the man he spoke to dressed like in the dream. I'll leave that out for privacy's sake. Now looking back, I can't recall what the message my father received was, but my mother told him then that both of us had seen a shadowy figure walk straight into the room, not a while before he got up. He didn't seem too shocked. I'd later learn that this was not uncommon in this family. This event took place in 2020, around the end of the year, when I was in the shower, living with my mum in an apartment building. Now, the bathroom has a small window just above the toilet, which looks into the lobby, which if open, has a decent view of anyone in the shower. So naturally, we would always have the window down almost completely. Now this window was also frosted glass, so you can make out a figure on the other side, but with no great detail. Over this window was a fly wire netting with a small hole in it around the bottom, about an inch or two from the window. Now for reference, this hole is not big at all. It's tiny, but it's there. So one day I'm showering, window less than an inch open as usual. Then in the corner of my eye, a long, somewhat pale finger began to extend through the small gap I left open in the window. At this point, I'm kind of too shocked to move, like a deer in headlights, but my mind was racing. I thought there was some creep trying to open the window or someone trying to scare me. I recalled the small hole in the flywire net, so I was about to shout something out at this person. Based on the size of the finger, I thought it was a guy. Until I realised that this doesn't add up. You could force fit your finger through the hole somewhat, sure. You would be scratching yourself on the exposed metal wire though. But after, the wire is a solid 1 to 2 inches of space before the window opening. And with the amount of finger I was seeing, nearly to the start of the proximal phalanx, meaning I could see past the knuckle, I was astonished that someone had a finger so long, and that it could fit in the small gap between the window and the wire net. Thing was, I know everyone who shares my lobby. All the people on my floor were of Vietnamese or African descent. and there were few Caucasian people on other levels, none of whom had such an abnormally long index finger. It was then that the finger began beckoning me. It folded up, like the gesture you would use to motion someone to come forward. At this point, I'm starting to entertain the idea that this is not a human being doing this. But the nail in the coffin for me was the fact that despite the finger gesturing for me to come forward, I could see no figure on the other side of the frosted window. No silhouette of a person whatsoever. A few seconds later, the finger retracted back through the window, and that was that. No sounds, no movements through the glass window. I got out of the shower immediately. Went outside. No signs of anyone. Something kind of strange happened to me a few years ago. I was living in an apartment townhouse with two other roommates. Both roommates were gone for a couple of days because it was Thanksgiving, and they were spending it with family, each to their respective hometowns. I had the house to myself for 3 or 4 days. On the second night alone, I decided to make myself some macaroni in the kitchen around 1 a.m. So I'm stirring the noodles in the pot, and out of nowhere, I become very, very terrified and fearful. I felt something, and some kind of fear of being watched, and I can't explain what this was. I looked over my shoulder almost to expect someone standing there, but there was nothing. I was trying to calm myself down because there was nothing. I couldn't shake this absolute terror and fear. I felt it climaxing and rising up in me. It was rising and rising, and the hair stood on my arms and neck, and I felt close to complete panic. And then pop! All the lights went out. It was pitch black, total darkness, and the stove turned off. And I became so terrified that I ran out the kitchen door with no shoes or coat. I ran out into the parking lot and felt like I was in a horror movie. There wasn't anywhere for me to go. I didn't know my neighbours, and it's 1 a.m. My feet were freezing though, as it was November, and after some time, I didn't know what to do but just calm down in the parking lot. I couldn't just not go back to my home. So eventually, I just got brave and went back in. I found my phone and used it as a light. I called someone and told them how scared I was, but nothing could really be done. They didn't live near me. I eventually went to sleep and woke up to the lights working again and soggy noodles on the stove. It just really freaked me out that my hair stood up and I had a panic attack before the breakers seemed to switch, or whatever happened with the electricity. Could be nothing, I guess, but it seems straight that I felt absolute terror. Like another sense came to me where I felt extremely unsafe. This happened to me a few days ago, and I have no idea what to make of it. I have no one I can comfortably talk to about this for answers, so I'm posting it here because I hope someone will take me seriously. Me and my friend, we'll call her Naomi, went to an antique store a few days ago, and as soon as we got inside, she felt something off. She can't figure out what it is, but there's just a general feeling that something isn't right. Gut feelings aren't something I really believe in, so I just told her everything was probably fine, and we continued into the store. Naomi kept looking over her shoulder the whole time, not in a frightened way, but more like she had her guard up and was on the lookout for anything that could go wrong. Whether that be a bookshelf falling over or someone having a heart attack. She says she's psychic for that kind of thing, but again, I'm a big skeptic. There is one thing I find strange though. I keep seeing someone out of the corner of my eye. I always notice them just a split second before they leave my line of sight, behind another shelf or always another corner. You know when you think you see shadows right at the edge of your vision, but there's nothing there when you look? It was that exact sensation, but I know someone was there. And it wasn't just my imagination. It wasn't necessarily threatening yet, but still a tiny bit curious. Here's where things get weird. Naomi and I are pretty good at sticking together when we go to shops like that, but we occasionally go off in different directions. Normally, we'll at least give each other a heads up if we're splitting off to a different section, but at some point, I turned around and she was just gone. No warning or anything. Initially, I thought it wasn't a big deal because I figured she'd turn up sometime. So I'm by myself in the back part of the store, and it's full of candles and astrology themed stuff. I thought I was alone, but when I went to leave that section, there's some woman standing right behind me. Immediately, I just got a weird vibe from her, and I was super uncomfortable. Like, she was standing just a little bit closer to me than a normal person would. I stepped out of the way because I thought she was trying to get past me, but she just got even closer. It put me on edge enough that I started to hold my keys between my knuckles. Before I could tell her to back off, I had the sensation that I was falling asleep. Everything in my brain just started going fuzzy, and it was getting harder to think. Next thing I know, I hear Naomi saying my name over and over, and I wake up, still standing in the exact same spot. But the woman wasn't there anymore. I asked Naomi what happened, and she said she had been trying to get my attention for 2 minutes. Apparently, I had just been staring blankly ahead as if I was hypnotized or something. I remember none of those few minutes. It's all completely gone, like I was literally asleep, standing up with my eyes open. I asked if she'd seen the woman, and she just got this serious look on her face and asked me, "Did she say anything to you?" I said I didn't hear her voice, but I was also a bit unaware of everything for a few minutes, so I just said that I don't remember. Naomi took my hand and walked us straight out of the store, and she would not let me talk to her about it anymore. She was really freaked out, to the point where she even checked the back seat of her car before we got back in, like she was making sure no one was hiding. She barely spoke the whole drive back. She dropped me off at home, and since then, we've only texted. But she will change the subject every time I try to bring up what happened in the store. And she'll do everything she can to talk me out of going back, like my life depends on it or something. I've been left without answers for this really weird encounter, and I needed to tell someone about it. If not for answers, then just for someone else to hear it and take me seriously. I know how all of it sounds, and I'm pretty sure most people in my life would think I'm crazy or something. I know I would assume my friend was crazy if they said the same thing to me. In terms of theories, I have nothing good. I don't think the woman drugged me, because I can't find anything online about any drug that just incapacitates a person for 2 or 3 minutes before instantly wearing off. When I regained awareness, it wasn't like a gradual thing. It was like Naomi flipped a switch. I don't think any drugs can do that without some other side effects. The other thing I thought of was that it would have actually been some sort of hypnosis, but I'm pretty sure that also doesn't make any sense. From what I can gather, it seems like someone has to consent to being hypnotized for it to work. You can't just go up to a random person and hypnotize them without warning. Maybe this is just me being cocky, but I feel like I'd be pretty difficult to hypnotize anyway. Just to be clear, I don't take any drugs and I don't drink. I don't even use over-the-counter cold medicine when I feel sick. I just typically let everything heal by itself. Also, I have no history of mental illness besides what some people in my family think is an undiagnosed case of OCD. If anyone has any ideas, even if they're really out there, I'm willing to at least hear them. Again, I know how this all sounds, and even if you don't believe me, I appreciate people listening to the whole thing. So my daughter, who's almost 13, has always seemed to have this kind of thing she would do when impending doom was near. The first instance was when my grandfather was sickly. He had prostate cancer. Anyway, well, one morning, we were over there helping my grandmother out. My daughter was probably 5 or 6 at the time, and we were just standing around talking, and I was talking to my granddaddy, and all of a sudden, she comes up to me and taps me and says, "Mama, can I get in the bed with granddaddy?" I really didn't want her to, because I was afraid she'd kick him by mistake or something, but he was like, "Yeah, you can get up here, baby." She got on the bed and had this very weird, almost sad look on her face. I didn't think anything of it. So fast forward a week later, my granddaddy died. The next one was, I had to keep my friend baby girl her while she worked. And later that day, my daughter made it home from school. and me and the baby was laying in the bed. I was like 5 months pregnant. So she came and stood on the side of my bed, rubbing the back of her hair. And she had the exact same look of sadness on her face as with my granddaddy. But I didn't think to put two and two together just yet. So she goes, "Mama, can I get in the bed with the baby?" I said yes. And she laid down beside him and she had a sad look all over her face. Well, the next week, the baby was dead from SIDS. The next incident involves my grandma. She was sick and I was feeding her and she could hardly talk, but she wanted to see my kids. So when my daughter got up to her, I looked at her face and she had the same sadness from the last 2 times. Then the next day, my grandma was dead. Back when I was in my late teens, I moved out of home, out of town, then rented a room from some couple. The woman didn't work, but her partner did, so she had lots of time on her hands. And she tried to control everything in the house, including me. I was working 2 jobs while studying. The woman, who literally had no life besides from trying to mess up other people's lives, started doing weird stuff. For example, I woke up to find her watching me sleep. She stole my sunglasses, killed my fish, etc. All in the name of being a... She tried bossing me around and in real life trolling. Though she would disappear every full moon to apparently get nude and dance with her coven in the mountains. She claimed to be a witch, despite my interest in spirituality and tarot. I don't believe in witches or witchcraft. I think the spells work on a belief system that causes a domino effect of either positive or negative things occurring. Anyway, I decided I had enough of tolerating her bullshit and moved out. That resulted in her stalking me via turning up to my workplaces and staring at me for hours. I reported her to the police, then she tried to cyber stalk me via Facebook and phoned me 1,000,000 times. After moving into a new place, I would wake up in the night to see something standing in the corner of my room. Yet whenever I got up and turned the light on, it disappeared. Hence, I assumed I was dreaming. Eventually, it started standing at the foot of my bed, but again, whenever I tried to get up or turn on the light, it would vanish. One night, I woke up to it standing there like usual, but this time, I could see a creepy woman's face on it. It was smiling at me. I said, "Fuck off," and it vanished. For a while, I didn't see the thing, but I started coming up with scratches all over my body. I had no idea where they were coming from. I would find them on my arms, chest, hips, and thighs. One night, I woke up and ran to the bathroom mirror because I thought something bit me, to find scratches on my shoulder and back like someone just clawed me. I checked my bed for anything that could scratch me and even visited a doctor who asked me if I was self-harming. I wasn't and couldn't figure out where the scratches were coming from. The last incident occurred one night when I was half asleep and rolled over to my side. I felt air on my face. Originally, I ignored it until I felt a big gust of air directly into my face. I opened my eyes to come face to face with this rotten, bloated, dead-looking woman. She looked wet, like someone killed her, then left her in some water to rot. Her body was coming out from underneath the bed, while her head was propped up near my face. I actually screamed and was too scared to get off the bed. I covered my face with the blanket, then started saying prayers and waited until the morning. After that, it never came back and the scratches healed. It scares me to think about, but I do wonder if it lived under my bed for a period of time and was scratching me from underneath. As to where it came from, again, I don't believe in spells. Whatever it was wanted to pose as female. I think it was part of my loser ex-housemate, like a malevolent manifestation of spite. When I lived in Florida, around Jupiter we had Juno and Marcinski Beach. My whole life I grew up on this beach, and at night some strange things have happened. From UFOs to apparitions, I've always felt a strong natural spirit here. Later in my teenage years, I was often kicked out of my house anywhere from weeks to months at a time. I lived on these beaches. Most specifically, I almost always stayed at Shower 39. Shower 39 was the heaviest I felt this nature spirit. I even saw what I dubbed a beach demon there in the trees. Two of my other friends saw this and still talk about this. Still, for whatever reason, I felt safe here and comfortable, sleeping below the shifting canopies of the sea grape forest. The way the beaches are laid out is a sidewalk, then a long stretch of sea grape forest that stretches the entire beast. Then the beach. I've spent many isolated nights on my own on these beaches, from 16 till 23. There was this tree that me and my friends dubbed the Spirit Tree. It was an uprooted tree that appeared on the beach in certain months. It would wash up on the beach mostly in the winter months. It'd wash up when the storms came, and it'd be on the beach for a couple of weeks or a few days. It'd be right where the surf met the beach, as most trees that washed up would be in the surf. Now, what made this tree unique is that it was the same tree, every time for as long as I can remember. It would also wash up in the same general area, from shower 32 to shower 44, most prominent around shower 39. My personal favourite shower, where I've experienced the strangest things in my life. I'd see it a lot while I was on serious psychedelic journeys. But other people who were sober and with me would see the tree and they always freaked out. Because on the rational side, this should not be possible. But here it was, with most of the deepest carvings remaining on it. The same exact tree, months later. You would drive yourself insane trying to figure it out. And around the tree, everyone would feel this vibe of deep respect, mystery, peace, love, and wonder. For some, it would elicit an overwhelming feeling of anxiety. I remember I was with this one girl when I found it one day. She didn't fully believe me, but insisted that we leave. I was climbing all over it, hugging it, looking at all our old carvings. I was tripping. Eventually, reluctantly, I agreed to keep walking the beach. She later told me she was at one point felt so nervous around it, she could catch a breath. I loved the spirit tree, and most of us hippies did as well. It was something that made no sense. The spirit tree showed itself to me a lot when I was in troubling times, and it always made me feel comfortable. However, every strange or paranormal experience I had on that beach, from UFO ghosts, had strange altered states that made no sense. And even one beach demon-like creature happened after I saw the spirit tree. Still, it never scared me. The spirit tree anyways. Anyways, this is one of my strange paranormal experiences. This, however, is the most nostalgic, and thoughts of the spirit tree makes me happy, as I remember this almost bond I had with it. Many nights alone after getting kicked out of my house, I'd go to the beach feeling a deep, lonely depression, just to find the spirit tree, and it would always lift my spirits. Believe it or not, I promise you that this happens on the beaches of Marcinski and Juneau. And if you find a tree washed up on the beach one late night around shower 39 with carvings all over it, looking older than time itself, show your respects to this wonderful, amazing spirit tree if it strikes your fancy. Don't if you don't want to. To many, it'll just be a washed up tree. But to those of us who know that beach like the back of our hands, this tree is so much more. I've had a handful of strange happenings, but this one takes the cake as the most sinister one that I've ever experienced. I don't even like thinking about it because it still chills up my spine. Okay, here goes nothing. When I was a kid, my mom moved from house to house a lot. We were not well off to say the least, which resulted in us staying with a lot of other people. This house had some strange things that happened right off the bat. We'd hear footsteps all over the house all hours of the day, but more often late at night. Doors would slam occasionally, drawers would be open, etc. Your typical haunted house type of deal. Being somewhat used to this at this point because I grew up on a haunted Coast Guard base, it didn't really bother me that much. It spooked me when doors would slam, but I wasn't really terrified. My mother was very Christian, and she would tell me not to pay attention to these things because they just wanted to scare you. So I braved it pretty well. It always seemed like my mom and I were attracted to these type of things. Well, these weird things started increasing over time. I started seeing a very inhuman entity in my room. This thing with a deformed trunk got half grey or blue in colour, huge eyes and lanky demeanour, and would be seen by my bedside looking down at me. Its face was skinny and deformed, and I could see the glowing blue bubbles floating around the room when it appeared. I couldn't not be afraid at this point, and I would now be sleeping in my mother's room. But this thing would keep appearing, and I would shake my mom till she woke up. When she woke, the entity would be gone. After a while, I learned to ignore this thing. When I felt the chills hit me when I was trying to sleep, I would throw the blanket and pillows over my head. Eventually, I'd start praying, and this seemed to work after a while. Well, one day, me and my friend are in the backyard playing Marco Polo without the pool. It was kind of like hide and go seek, except you can whisper polo and you have to stand still. Most of the time, my friend would always whisper polo. We also have this shed in the corner of the yard. It was always locked, so I never knew what was in it. I walked around deprived of my vision, calling out Marco. No response. I called out again with no response. I called out again rather annoyed because he always tried to cheat like that. I called out one last time. I heard a whisper. Finally someone decided to play faith, I thought. I turn around. Marco. I hear the whisper, Polo. I start walking towards the sound. Marco. No response. Marco. Still no response. Arms reached out, walking blindly, taking slow steps. I feel a wall. I get ready to call out again. I get cut off with a low, evil growl. Not human, nor animal. Then flashes of fire and death happen so gruesome, I cannot chalk it up to an overactive imagination. I would have to be seriously disturbed to see what I did. In the fire and death, I saw flashes of tormented faces melting and bubbling in the fire. I tried to open my eyes, but the images were still burning through. I saw hundreds of faces tormented and screaming. Bodies twisted, charred, and disfigured dreams pierced my eardrums, so blood-curdling, they drowned out my own screams. And there were growling and howls all around. It was so terrible when I came through. My friend was shaking me very rapidly. I was in a ball, holding my legs, screaming and crying. I ran into the house and told my mom. She instantly got us out of that house that day and moved into a different friend's house. We went to church all the time after that, and she had a priest pray over me for weeks after that. I never experienced anything like that again, thank God. I'm glad I never went into detail about the faces, but my mom would have definitely sent me to therapy. I was haunted by dreams of this place a few years after it happened. But even the dreams aren't as bad as what really happened. The faces I saw melted and boiled till the skin peeled away to expose the meat and bone behind it. Then that would melt into a different face, and the same thing would happen. These faces all screamed while melting in intense anguish. This was actually terrifying for me to write, guys. I honestly hope nobody can relate to this experience. Believe in hell or don't, I know what I saw, and I can never forget. In the summer of 2017, around 2 hours after my grandfather passed away, me and my sister were in a horrific car accident. It was a bit past midnight. We were on our way to my grandpa's house. I was behind the wheel and driving moderately fast. I was supposed to make a U-turn, but the brakes failed and we hit the guardrail. The front of the car was demolished and both of us were badly injured. I believe I lost consciousness for a few seconds, and when I woke up again, I looked at her and saw blood all over her face, and realised that she too had lost consciousness. She was slowly coming to, when I squeezed myself out the window and went to the other side to get her out of the car. Her door was stuck just like mine, so I couldn't get her out. People started to gather around and called 911. The firefighters came and removed the door and finally brought her out of the car. When the ambulance was taking us to the hospital, I was having the longest deja vu of my entire life. I knew which hospital we were going to, even though nobody told me. I knew how the interior of the hospital looked, somewhere I've never been before. I knew the name of the doctor who was supposed to stitch me up, someone that I've never met before. It's weird, because as soon as me and my sister were alone and could talk to each other, she told me about how she feels like she's been there before and was feeling deja vu the whole time. It might seem normal for people who suffered head trauma to experience these kind of things and read too much into something that isn't actually there, but it's a lot more weird than it seems at first glance. I believe that both of us died on that timeline, but for some reason our consciousness switched on into parallel versions of ourselves in another universe. And the constant feeling of deja vu was because of our consciousnesses settling into the bodies of our alternate selves, with the original consciousnesses still present, which caused the feeling of experiencing everything twice. Now here's something truly bizarre. There was a song called Zalem by Mohsen Shavoshi, which our mom loved and listened to almost every day. Even when my mom didn't play it, my older brother would. It was kind of a signature song in our home back in 2005 to 2007 or 8. So a few months after the crash, I was having a conversation with one of my co-eds about music. She was without a doubt the number one fan of Mohsen Shavoshi, to the point that we used to call her Shavoshist. She was talking about her favourite Shavoshi song, and I just remembered all those years of listening to Zalem. I said, yeah, he's a good singer. My mum loved Zalem. She used to play it on repeat until someone became sick of hearing it. She frowned and asked me about the song that I just mentioned. She said that he doesn't have a song called Zalem. I thought maybe I got the name wrong, so I sang the chorus. She shook her head and said it's not Shavoshi's song. She named Farouk as the singer. I swore that the song I used to listen to was Shavoshi. His voice is unmistakable. There's no way I'd be wrong about that. So she asked me to send her the song. Obviously, I didn't have our old computer in which the song was stored on, and I couldn't find our old Shavoshi mix CD. So I googled it, and no matter how much I looked, I couldn't find it online. I even searched for the lyrics and only found the song Zalem by Farouk. I thought maybe it's the same song and I was wrong all along. So I downloaded and listened to it. But the song by Farouk can't be more different from what I remember. Sure, it has the same lyrics, but the melody and genre of it are completely different. So I asked my mum about it, and guess what? She never heard of it, nor did my brother, who gave us the song in the first place. They have no recollection of that song, whether it's Shavoshi or Farouk. On the other hand, my sister remembers it. I sang her the chorus and she said it was Shavoshi's song. Somehow, she and I have memories about a song which doesn't even exist in this world. I don't know why or even how it's possible, but I sincerely believe that we moved through the dimensions when we were both unconscious after the crash. I've heard stories that happened to other people, which are similar to our experiences. I don't want to get into too much on this one, but I think it has something to do with my grandpa's death. Maybe we were supposed to die that night, but his death caused an event which led us to moving on into another universe where we didn't die. Some of you that work in hospitals or have loved ones that work in hospitals, or have been close to loved ones as they took their last breaths and transitioned to the great unknown, may have heard of what I'm about to describe. There's a particular phenomenon that occurs to people in those last moments, and I'm talking about the appearance of kids running around their deathbed, or just outside of their room. This is to be differentiated to the phenomenon of close ones that have passed away, visiting in days prior to their deaths. This is different. This occurs hours, if not minutes, before their deaths. I experience this with greater frequency whenever I work in the ICU unit, where people are very sick. What most patients describe as cheerful kids, running about around their beds in a playful manner, snickering around or just playing. Most patients usually respond by calling the nurse and asking, Who are these kids running around and where are their parents? And scaring the living bejesus out of them if they're new nurses. If they're experienced nurses, they know the time of the end is soon to come, and they communicate promptly with us doctors to let us know to be ready. Literature often chalks this phenomenon up to the lack of oxygen in the brain, or neurochemical changes in the process of death and dying. But the pattern is very recognizable, and the experience is very similar across all cultural backgrounds and ages. Almost all hospitals have a story about these kids, and if you're entering the field of medicine, nursing, or any other health allied profession, you will certainly hear these stories. So if you're doing the rounds in ICU late at night and hear some snickering or tiny feet running in the hallways, prepare, because the call of code green or code red is about to sound off in the PA system. As an internal medicine physician, I deal with all types of diseases and human conditions. Now, I've done this job in medicine, has been calling for more than 15 years. So I can easily say that at this point in my career, I'm able to identify patterns in patients' experiences and see some commonalities. Well, these commonalities also expand to the realm of the arcane and unknown. There's a common experience that is, should we say, odd in its reproducibility and parallel nature from patient to patient. I'm talking about patients coming in for restless nights, poor sleep quality, and headaches that undoubtedly get a later diagnosis of sleep apnea from me after the patient's sleep study. Now, here's the interesting part. Almost all these patients have an issue with hyperreal dreams that can range from an astral projection type of experience, hovering above their bodies, and in some instances, encounters with family members that have passed on, or encounters with beings as well. The diagnosis here is straightforward. Obstructive sleep apnea is the most common sleep-related breathing disorder. It causes you to repeatedly stop and start breathing while you sleep. There are several types of sleep apnea, but the most common is obstructive sleep apnea. This type of apnea occurs when your throat muscles intermittently relax and block your airway during sleep. A noticeable sign of obstructive sleep apnea is snoring. When you stop breathing, your oxygen level drops drastically for short periods of time. This jerks your physiology into a panic and wakes you up to rescue you from your impending oxygenless doom. But when your oxygen is critically low, you can say that you're dangerously close to the threshold between life and death. In essence, a near-death experience on your favourite pillow. So the next time you see your loved one in a dream, your astral project, or have a wildly realistic dream, you could have had a brush with the Grim Reaper without knowing it. For context, my husband has a very short temper, but I've been working on communications with him and we get along pretty well, with banter here and there. My husband, 45 male, let's call him S, has very weird dreams that seem to be more like a premonition at times, but he can't even dream of some lottery numbers. Anyway, about a week ago on a Monday, he told me not to accept any food offerings from anyone and not to leave my bag unattended. I carry a haversack usually as I go to gym during my lunch hours. I told him it's impossible to carry my bag everywhere I go, but I didn't receive any food offerings. Would be devastated if someone brought me a Krispy Kreme donut, only for me to refuse it. I asked him why he was giving me specific instructions, and he told me in his dream, an unknown entity told him that someone is out to get us through me. As it's a normal occurrence, him and his dream, I took note of this request. A few days went by, uneventful of course, but on a Friday, as I didn't go to the gym on that day, I decided to change my bag, from a haversack to a sling bag. I left my haversack on the floor of my room and I'd forgotten to set it aside. My husband picked up my bag. He's a bit OCD, can't stand a mess, and lo and behold, a condom fell out. Now, this would have easily caused a misunderstanding, except he had a dream forewarning him about something happening by me, And that condom stands in between me getting my ass divorced and the paranormal. How did the stupid thing even get in my bag? Also, we didn't have any condoms in the household at that very moment. I wasn't home when that happened, and naturally, he was a bit upset. So he stayed out of the house and told me to look at the pack when I came home. I did. I was like, meh, what is this? And told him to haul his arse home soon. And no, I wasn't cheating. Cheating is a very tiring game. I tossed the condom aside and totally forgot about it. S, on the other hand, was determined to check the condom. It was sealed, but the contents didn't feel like a condom was in it. He tore the pack open, and the contents were hairs, sand, some red beds, and a piece of what looked like a tiny fragments of a rock. I'm really not sure what spell is binded in that condom, but I think whoever that person is meant to break my marriage apart. I'm adamant that it came from one of his friends. Why? Because regardless of how qualified S is, he hasn't been successful with job finding for the last 3 months. Luckily, we're a 2-income household, and I was able to carry my family for the last few months. Stressful, but doable. He has this friend who's constantly checking up on his well-being. I have a feeling it's just to ensure that S is down on his luck and all. That person often contacted S, and even when S replied sarcastically, that friend kept messaging him over and over on the pretext of getting him an interview or a job, etc. I've decided to read some prayers over and over by myself. S has just started a new job this week. Nothing significant happened to me, and whatever I was trying didn't succeed.